Hello there, you're here with the single malt review on 3rd of June 2017, Ardbeg Day.
Yes, indeed. Ardbeg Day comes but once a year, and we are optimally positioned to experience it as one of the most southerly sort of recipients of Ardbeg Day down here in New Zealand. We get the first sort of sample of the Ardbeg Day bottling, not taking into account the committee release, which is only for rich and or well-connected people, which we are neither. So we are going to bring you the People's Ardbeg Day, and we hope the first review of such. So we will not waste any more time and crack into it and see whether it's one to go for. Last year's certainly was, so our hopes are pretty high on this one. I do hope we can recommend it once again. I'll have to open this one. Fresh bottle, obviously, so we might give it a minute or two to wake up just as we pour it. Although it won't exactly have been in the bottle very long. This one will come out of its casks pretty jolly recently, I think.
Now, the only difference from the committee release is the bottling strength, correct? The committee release is full cask strength, this one is 46.
Usually that's how they go. Honestly, I haven't really looked up much about the committee release, as that's not really my interest, but that's generally the case. If they get it a bit earlier and they get it at cask strength and for astonishing quantities of money. Now, I'll just pour a little bit in here to show you the colour, which is of course natural in this case, as all Ardbeg, and it's a pretty healthy colour there, as you would expect, as we will tell you why later on. But I thought for this one we'd use these lovely and pro bono from Ardbeg, I should let on. Enormous whiskey glasses. You can see they gave us these last year, but they're clearly making too much money because the difference is just quite astonishing. I don't know, maybe it's commentary on how much whiskey we're drinking, but so I'm just going to tip mine in here, and
I'm going to go for the smaller glass,
satisfactory,
just for health and safety.
We haven't tested it, but I'm chillingly sure that this would almost hold an entire bottle of whiskey were you that way inclined. But to keep things thematic, yes, we'll use our wee Ardbeg ones here. So 46%.
Yes.
Not as strong as other committee releases have been, but it looks like they are settling on the 46% thing, which I suppose it's all right. We'll manage with
committee
46.
release would be a full cask strength,
it would,
whereas
yeah.
General bottling.
And
46.
what is the deal with this one, Dave? They all Ardbeg Day bottlings. They always have a certain sort of a theme, something that they've done a little bit differently.
Well, this time,
what's this one's
the big unique selling point here is the casks. We have some Black Sea oak. I'm not too familiar on the many different species of oak. However, this stuff is straight from the edges of the Black Sea, and it is virgin oak. Nothing has been in these casks before. They're not ex-sherry or ex-bourbon or ex-anything else. So, there'll be some fresh timber. I'm expecting a lot of sappy, woody notes.
Yeah, and that's really, really quite unusual. As for who knows exactly what varieties of oak they get down there in the Black Sea, but it will certainly be one thing, which is European oak. And whiskey aged in virgin European oak is incredibly rare. I can't, off the top of my head, think of another example. There's plenty of examples of whiskies being aged in virgin American oak, which is a damn sight cheaper, because that's fairly commonplace if you know your bourbon. So there's a lot of those barrels rolling around. But no, new European oak barrels, that's very, very uncommon. Now, it hasn't spent its entire life in those. The maturation in the fresh oak, that was secondary.
Right.
I only just found that out today. The marketing makes it sound it's a bit oblique.
Yeah,
you could come away thinking that they'd spent their whole life in that. From someone who has aged malt whiskey, I do the orbit of home distilling. We might do an episode on that further down the track, but never mind for now. And who has done an experiment with aging in new European oak. It doesn't work very well. You get sort of wood tea very, very quickly. So it makes sense that this would be more of a finish than an actual maturation. The other thing I learned this morning when we were off having a look at this was there's it's not just one batch of whiskey. This is a sort of a coming together of quite a few different ages. So I thought we might be dealing with something, all of 8 years old, maybe 9 years old, getting close to that 10 where Ardbeg sort of starts becoming what we know as Ardbeg. But no, this is a blend of different ages, so there is in fact quite a lot of older Ardbeg in here, which I was not expecting, but it's usually a very good thing, because old Ardbeg, as well as being totally unobtainable, like almost no other whiskey, is really, really quite amazing.
If there's something astonishingly peated like Ardbeg, a bit of extra age would be good to mellow out some of that peaty harshness, and make it a bit more accessible to the likes of me. So
I think we've given this ample time to wake up, and we will dive straight in and just have a wee look.
As you'd quite expect, a heavy initial hit of peat, an oily, slightly fishy Isla peat, hint of salt. Now the Kelpie is, as well, I'm sure some viewers know, the mythical Scottish water spirit.
I think it shows up in Ireland as well.
There are similar creatures
under a different name,
throughout. But a water spirit that can appear as variously a human or horse or somewhere in between. And also that's a play on kelp, a bit of a seaweed motif going on, and apparently some hints of that in the tasting notes too.
What I would say about the nose is that it is, as Ardbeg always is, it's unmistakably Ardbeg. That's the first thing Ardbeg always smells like very few other whiskies, is Ardbeg. It's that sort of dry, salty, tang, ash, without the huge quantity of sort of swimming pool level iodine that something like a Lefroy or a Killoman would bring along with it. Ardbeg, very, very distinct. How this differs to me is it's extremely sweet and unctuous, which is unusual for Ardbeg, and that will be the new wood coming through.
Yeah, there's a bit of a syrupy nectar on the nose, which I'm not used to. I was chalking it up at first to me just being more used to heavily peated whiskey now, whereas in the past some Ardbegs have tasted more or less indistinguishable to me because they've all been so overwhelmed by peat.
I get tremendous sort of butterscotch and toffee, chewy, sweet caramel, which always blends really, really well with a very, very salty Ardbeg. I always like my caramel on the salty end of things, and so that always does very well for me. The official tasting notes are very big on dark chocolate and cocoa. I can detect that. To me, it's even more of a milk chocolate. It's the sort of the sweet, chewy nature of it imparts kind of an idea of creaminess to me, which turns that cocoa element into more of a lighter milk chocolate than the official notes would describe. But that's how tastes differ person to person.
I'm not getting any chocolate personally, but if sticking with a confectionery store motif, I'm getting hints of aniseed balls and some perhaps Dutch salted licorice.
Certainly licorice. Quite a lot of licorice. And right on the end, and significantly bringing things together for me, there's a little bit of very, very sweet orange. Sweet orange with all of the zest in there. Have you ever had one of those appallingly large chocolate oranges? You're supposed to whack them and they turn into segments.
Terry's chocolate orange?
Conceivably. Yeah. You see them once in a blue moon, usually at Easter down in New Zealand. But reminiscent of that on the back. So there's the chocolate showing itself there. So we should see what it's like at full strength, which shouldn't be too punchy at only 46.
Oh, that's a lively, almost aggressive peatiness at first, but backing that up is how to describe it? If you know the smell of freshly sawn oak, that sort of the wet timber that's just been cut and exposed to
sort of a pile of sawdust on the floor, kind of.
It tastes like that smell. That's probably not the most useful tasting note, but that's what it's reminiscent of. The fresh, sort of slightly green timber, freshly hewn oak.
It is quite sappy, is what I'd call it. Almost a slightly piney sappiness, which of course, not being oak in the slightest, but that's sort of what it brings to mind. It's really quite a fresh, almost cooling palate, whereas the nose is very, very sweet. There's lashings of sort of minty menthol coming along in the palate, which
has kind of an iciness.
It cools as it finishes, and it's quite a long, finish, and it really does, while warming the throat up, it has that menthol cooling as well, which is quite a dynamic sensation.
Good long finish. It's really sticking around. The peat mellows out, leaving a kind of a fumy fug of different flavours just hanging around inside the mouth. There's a warmth full of spices, licorice, a little bit of brine.
On the palate, it's definitely it's sharp, not pungent. So a little bit of a disconnect from the nose there. I'll put a wee bit of water in and see how that alters things.
And yeah, it's even bits of seaweed. A little bit of that dank vegetative heft.
Hasn't done a great deal to the nose. But Ardbeg's pretty difficult to shift with just a bit of water.
No, that has really mellowed out a lot of the peat for me, anyway. It's brought out some of the sweetness. I'm actually smelling some of the milk chocolate you mentioned earlier.
It has sweetened the palate quite a lot. There's quite a lot more sugary sweetness in there now. And a bit less of that sharp tang that was there before. But by and large, hasn't shifted things too far away. It's a bit of a fruitier whiskey now. I think, was I to call it one way or the other, I would have... I'd drink it at its, well, not natural, at its full strength of 46%, just to maintain some of that chocolatey creaminess there, rather than ending up with things too fresh and fruity, which I don't think goes quite as well.
I prefer this with a little water. It's cut down the peat a bit and brought out the sappy, fruity qualities. If anything, it's reminding me a bit of... have you had a craft beer that uses exorbitant amounts of Washington hops? The rich, fruity, resinous hops from Washington State? Yes.
As they're known.
There's a bit of that.
Yeah, it certainly brings it in more of a herbal, fruity direction. I suppose it depends what you're after, but the fact that we can enjoy it either way sort of speaks to its versatility.
And said fresh timber, though, that is the fresh wood is such a driving force there, and it's good. It meshes well with the ancient, weighty sensation which comes from the peat.
I'm trying to think back to my last Ardbeg review, which was Dark Cove, which I really, really enjoyed. Dark Cove, I think, was one of the very best Ardbeg day bottlings for
you rated it a 91.
many years. And I think in hindsight, probably marked that slightly hard, but... never mind.
Oh, 91 is a heck of a score.
It is a heck of a score. I just feel a little guilty giving this one a 90 because I think I will reflect on Dark Cove a little more fondly. But that was a fair while ago now. I didn't have quite the experience that I do now, and other things to base it against. But this one is certainly a 90 from me. But I would say that qualitatively. Dark Cove was a better release than this one, even though it only looks like 1 point on the scoreboard. That was still my favourite. This one, no slouch though, you'd have to say. What do you think?
I like it. The use of virgin oak casks adds a real point of difference. It stands out from previous Ardbegs to me for that reason. It's got a good unique character. It's a good way to experience new oak, and as you say, the rare thing that is new European oak. Scores-wise, this one gets an 88 from me. The huge reliance on peat, which is obviously Ardbeg's signature, is just not always my favourite style of whiskey. This is done very well. So take my score in mind that I'm not as much of a peat head, and there's so much here that it's perhaps detracting from some of the other qualities it could have. But still, that's a high score from me for this style of whiskey.
Well, there you have it. Hopefully that has given you something to go on, but of course, always recommend, if you've got an Ardbeg day happening in your neighbourhood, just go and try it. It's the very best way of deciding whether you like a whiskey or not. If we've proved anything over the years, it's that individual reviewers, very, very individual, and very subject to their own likes, dislikes, and individual sort of quirks. So if you can taste a whiskey, go and taste a whiskey. If you can find a sample, find a sample. It's the very best way of finding out for yourself. But at any rate, before we go on even longer, this has been the Single Malt Review, Ardbeg Day 2017 bottling review. I'll shop this one up and get it out on the airwaves very, very shortly so that it's of some use to people shopping for Ardbeg today. And while you're out there, we'll have a little, very, very short Ardbeg Day video of our wee adventure to the shop. They always put on a few games, novelties and whatnot, so I will cut something together there. Do have a look at it while you're out there. At any rate, Single Malt Review, out. Slanger.